Welcome everybody to the Centre for Research Collections here at the University of Edinburgh. We're delighted that so many of you are interested in coming along tonight. Just to introduce myself before I introduce our guest tonight, I'm Rachel Hosker and I'm Archives Manager and Deputy Head of Special Collections here at the library. And within our collections we have a whole range of material about the start of this building. And we have colleagues as well here from Historic Environment Scotland who have the practice archive of Basil Spence, where Andrew was working at the time that this building came into being. This year, this academic year, this building is 50 years old, and we'll be doing a number of events, of which this is one of the first, to celebrate the building, its life, the way the students feel about it, staff who've worked here and the way they feel about it, and hopefully we will at some point have a party. 60s style, I keep pushing for the 60s style. And so do watch this space in terms of events. So tonight we're having an in-conversation event with Andrew Merrylees. Welcome, Andrew. We had a chat a while ago. It's all Denise who works here. I think it was her fault.
One of my neighbours.
Yes. So she said, "Oh, I know the architect." So Andrew and I had a chat, and I thought it would be a lovely idea to share Andrew's memories of this building and the whole process of it being created. It is such an iconic building in the university's estate. And I think we'll hear some interesting stories tonight. We had some good giggles, I think, when we were chatting, as well as some serious moments. But to introduce Andrew, if you don't mind, Andrew's an honorary professor of architecture and has a very illustrious career from the 1950s onwards. And he is a member of several societies, and I think your first job was with Basil Spence, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. He's been an external examiner, consultant architect, and won so many awards that I'm not going to give the whole list, I don't think. But your student senior design prize, was that in the early days when you were a student as well?
That was at college.
Yeah, great. So, and one of Andrew's first projects was this building, but you've built many libraries over the years.
This was my first library, my first major building as project architect.
So if we start at that very beginning, how did you get involved in the development of the new library? Where were you in terms of career? And
Yeah, well, I hope you'll bear with me because my memory is not all that great after 50 years, so I've written down a few bullet points just to keep me on the right track. Just to go right back to my beginnings, in 1951 I started at the Glasgow School of Architecture, which was partly based in the old Macintosh Art School. And the summer of 1952 I was looking for a summer job, and Basil Spence had just won the Coventry Cathedral competition, so I thought, here I go. So I got on a bus, I went through, knocked the door in 40 Murray Place and got a job for the summer. I went back every summer thereafter until I graduated.
so it started with a summer job then?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
at the end of my first year in architecture, yeah.
So it's like some of our students do student internships today, so you were trailblazing.
Yeah. And after my architecture degree, I did postgraduate in town planning. So after that, in 1957, I went back full-time to Basil Spence's at the princely salary of, I remember, £425 per annum. In '63, I was appointed the project architect for the library at the ripe old age of 30. And when you asked me to bring along some colleagues who were with me on this project, I couldn't think of any of them, because they were all probably at the peak of their career. They were probably all in their 50s when I was in my 30s. So I was very fortunate to be given that job.
And I think we talked about where you'd looked at a design. You've been asked to do a design for this project in, was it 63?
Yeah. Well, Basil Spence had just recently done an overall campus plan for the George Square area, and he had indicated a footprint for the library in this, roughly this position, with some indicative elevations with vertical fins. So that was pretty well my brief. So it was the time of the RSA summer annual exhibition, so I did some elevations of the building, and at the time I was very much into Japanese and Scandinavian architecture, so I twisted the fins around, and that's why we got the horizontal. However, Basil saw it and liked it and supported it, so I was then free to go ahead and build the thing.
So it's your design with the approval of
Oh
Basil
yeah, very
Spence.
much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, nothing is. That's one thing I learned, was that nothing is ever a one person. Everything's a team effort. Okay, you need a team captain now and again, or a benign dictator or something like that. But yeah.
And was that your role? Your team captain, I'll call you, rather than benign dictator.
Well, it was both. I think you can have as many discussions as you like, but ultimately somebody has to take responsibility for making a decision. And,
So in those designs where you were thinking through your ideas for the sketches, and you mentioned your love of Japanese and Scandinavian architecture, did you do a lot of sketches and drawings, preparatory work, and what influenced that apart from just the general architecture? Because I know you draw, don't you, and paint?
I've always drawn and painted. In fact, it was a big decision when I was 4 years old, was I going to be an architect or an artist. I had an uncle who was an architect, so I went that road. But I never ever gave up painting, and I kept two things going, running in parallel with each other all the way through. And I found that was very helpful for my architecture, because my artist's eye informed my architecture, and vice versa. For instance, an architect draws a rectangle for a window, and he knows that's just a window, it's a specification, but with your artist's eye, it's got glass on it. Somebody's put curtains in the window, there's a potted plant, and the stonework on the side is going to weather and streak and so on. So it was been very good to go from a 6H pencil during the day to a 6B pencil at night.
It's almost like one extreme to the other in terms of the pencil. Yeah. I think we'll come on a little bit later to that idea of aesthetics and architecture,
right.
Because we do have a gentleman peering at us from a portrait at the back,
oh yes,
which
one of my heroes.
We'll get on to. So I'm keen to find out some of the detail. I think in the lift when we were coming up with your wife, we were talking. I remember talking to Andrew about some of the detail, and you were involved not only in the design of the building, but in the fixtures, in the fittings, and the look and feel.
That was an era when the architect did everything from inception to completion and beyond. And we designed absolutely everything in this building, including the furniture. We chose the crockery and the knives and forks for the canteen. We had Andrew Chisholm, who was head of graphics art at the college, to do the signposting, and he set up a font for the signposting.
So it's a special font.
And they carried it through chose the font for the typewriters for the secretaries.
So it all fitted together.
Yes, it was a total thing.
Yeah, and I think, we mentioned earlier, there's some people will be sitting on some of the original chairs.
Oh yes, we selected the Anne Jacobsen bent plywood chairs, which were just coming out at that time. And there was an advert, I remember, with Christine Keeler sitting astride this thing, looking backwards. And I'm sure that photograph sold it to the university. And I remember they cost £5 a head. And they're still here. And I've done many other libraries and since then. And the run-of-the-mill chairs have only lasted about half or a quarter of the time of that one. So it was a good £5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're actually very comfortable, actually.
Of course they are. Yeah, they're classics, and they fit in absolutely everywhere. You'll see them in cathedrals and.
Yeah.
And
So we've got the famous chairs, and they are, people do like sitting on them in meetings in this building. I'll have the original chair. So you mentioned Andrew from Edinburgh College of Art. Were there a few other people that were absolutely key to getting this project going, to being involved in design team meetings and making sure that the details were right with yourself?
Well, as I say, it was very much a team effort, and everybody was involved in the design process, including, I was going to say the client, but I really mean the users. I mean, there's a difference between a client and very often a difference between a client and a user. And Dick Fivefoot and Ian Thompson were involved in every single decision that was made.
Yeah,
and
so
Ian
they were the librarians here.
Dick Fivefoot was the librarian, Ian Thompson was one of the assistants, and he sat on every design team meeting. And we were into all sorts of details like the study cars, which are against the window. I was told then, I think it was 11% of people are left-handed. So we had to make sure that the light was coming the right way for those. So there should be 11% of these cars in that orientation. But all sorts of details like that were thrashed out. I don't think anything was missed.
No. So it's interesting. I've been through a process of building an archive building and had to sit in on design team meetings.
Yeah.
But I don't think I went to every single one. I must admit.
Well, maybe he didn't go to them all, but he was at most of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier as well about how a library should have books in it.
Right.
And with that being the case, there's something quite unique about the shelving that was
That's Luxfer shelving.
Yeah.
Yes, we designed the shelving. It was designed by Luxfer, and it was marketed as the Edinburgh Slimline.
So it was because of this project. It had the Edinburgh name on it.
Yes.
And was it used in libraries around the UK?
Yeah.
So when you went on to do other libraries, I knew you did Liverpool, the Sidney Jones Library, and places like that.
Yeah.
Did you use the same? Did you use the Edinburgh shelving for that?
I'm pretty sure we did. My memory's not sure.
We'll say we did.
Yeah.
So you talked about working with the contractors and how it was a team and everyone came together. Do you think that kind of project is easy to happen today as well? That kind of way you worked?
No, it doesn't happen today, I'm afraid. No. But working with the contractor, I mean, I was very naive, and I thought the contractor should be involved in the design process right from the very start.
Yeah.
So I managed to persuade people that we would nominate the main contractor, which paid dividends no end.
Yeah.
Because we still had competitive tendering for all the subcontracts. So it meant that the QS was dealing with real money and not estimates all the time. So we were able to maximise the money that we had. Now I'll tell you, the building was built for £2 million.
Yeah?
2 million. That was our appointment was very brief. It was build a library of so many square metres for £2 million in 24 months.
In 2 years?
Yeah, and it was done.
Yeah.
It wasn't furnished then, but it was the fabric of the building was done in that time.
So
And thanks to, very much to the input from the contractor, because we were able to design the basic structure and so on to suit the methodology of the contractor. For instance, he said on the site he would put 2 tower cranes up, one there and one there, and these cranes would be able to lift 1.5 tons at the perimeter. So we said to all Arabs, right, here's they are, precast concrete units, 1.5 tons. So there's maximum efficiency with that. Things like just even the shape of the foundations. Instead of having pad foundations on every column, have a strip foundation along the row, because with one you've got 10% mechanical dig, 10% manual dig, another one, and then the mechanical dig is like 90%. So just changing the shape of things with the same amount of concrete saved a lot of money.
I think we've got photographs that detail some of the process, and Grant, who's sitting at the back, will be able to tell us. But there's photographs, you know, those cranes you've just described.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we do have them on our images website that you'll be able to have a look at if you want to delve into that as well.
Yeah. Where were we?
We were at the mechanical diggers going into it, the build process.
The shape, just simple things like the shape of the foundation has become more efficient.
And when
other things, I mean, we have got Danish white beech throughout.
Oh, yeah.
So we were able to pre-plan that. The trees were growing when we were selected in Denmark. In Denmark.
Yeah.
They were cut down at the right time of year, they were kiln dried, and they were brought on site. And I bet there is not a piece of twisted wood in this building whatsoever.
But you can clearly see the wood as you come into the building in that lovely space.
Well, that's
different kind of wood there.
That's Burmese teak. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, great lengths to all these. If you look at these strips of wood in the entrance hall, they go from floor to ceiling in one piece. They're not jointed anywhere.
No, it's just. So you probably had to be quite precise. I mean, that might be a daft thing to say, but if your design is so precise, you've got your contractors on board knowing what materials they can use.
Yeah,
everything has to fit together.
But we also had a resident architect, one of my chaps, on site full time. We had a resident structural engineer on site. We had a full time clerk of works, and I was on here a lot of the time. But yes, you're right. I mean, even just making sure that when the electrician put his piece of conduit down the wall, that it was going to coincide with a plank of plank of the beach, rather than be halfway on and halfway off. All that kind of detail was able to go into it because we were hands-on all the time.
So you mentioned the Burmese teak and the Danish wood. I think you've also mentioned the type of material that was used in the exhibition area too.
Well, that's emerald pearl granite. That's from Ireland.
Yeah.
Japanese mosaics in the toilets. Danish white beech. Norwegian quartz on the floor. What else? Oh, externally we've got York roach bed, Portland stone is on the facade, and every piece of that is a work of art because it's got all the little crustaceans and things in it. And again, we had O'Varap, who just come off working on the Sydney Opera House. That's had farming, so we had that kind of benefit of thing. And we found out the coefficient of expansion of the Portland stone and concrete are equal, so the one adheres to the other without any physical support, although we did put stainless steel pins in just in case.
Just in case.
Yeah. And the ground floor is riven York stone. I think that's about it. Pirelli rubber. The Yakisman chairs, yeah.
It's an astonishing amount of detail, and that always has to go into any build. But having built a number of libraries now, you know, the kind of materials and the kind of project. Did you have favourite kinds of materials to work with that would execute the design that you'd thought of? And did you take that onto other library jobs that you'd done?
Yeah. Well, at my naive stage at 30-year-old, I thought anything was possible. So I just chose the materials that I liked. But then it has to go through the process of cost analysis and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I wasn't inhibited at all. I never have been. I think because
otherwise you put barriers in the way before you even start.
yes.
Is it your least favourite building?
No, it's my most favourite building. Yeah, it has to be, because there are very few times in one's career where one is at the position I was in at that time, where I was involved in everything. I mean everything, from inception to completion. And people were working for me. Up until that point, I was working for other people. And then after that point, people were working for me again. So it's always unique in that, and that happens, I suppose, in everyone's career. So went on. Near the end of this job, we won an international competition for University College Dublin.
Yes.
So we went on to that, and then we went on to Liverpool, Aston and Birmingham, Heriot Watt, the Erskine Medical Library, a few others, and I ended up with the National Library of Scotland. But by that time, I had left Spence's. I became an associate in '68, I became a partner in '72, and I resigned in '84. Mainly because the practice had got too big, and I was not on the drawing board anymore. And I wasn't doing the sort of thing, again, it happens in everybody's career. So at the age of 50, I resigned my partnership, set up my own practice with 4 or 5 people, and vowed that that was as big as it was going to get. It never went any bigger than that. And with that size of a team, you can build anything, design anything, and be involved as much as you wish. I don't know if I've got a style or not, but I think one thing I did learn from the library was that one should always go back to basic principles. And it's the easiest thing in the world, once you've done 1 library, 2 libraries, 3 libraries, become an expert. Then there's a tendency to take shortcuts. See, I did it this way before, and therefore it will work again. And that's an easy way out. But if you go back to basic principles and look, and go back to Patrick Geddes, look at the context, look at the time, look at all the other constraints like finances and so on.
Patrick Geddes is looking down on us. He's at the back there, the portrait that we've got in the collection. So
I did a planning degree after my architecture, and I think I learned almost more about architecture during that time than I did in the previous 5. It came all to do about context and so on. But the biggest thing I learned from him was his thinking machine.
Yeah, do. Hence the flip chart of people wondering why it was there.
Get his thinking. You probably all know this anyway. In any problem, there is a certain number of basic ingredients. Patrick Geddes was the father of modern town planning, and he said folk, work, place. But if you go back to architecture and back to Vitruvius, commodity, firmness and delight, or Macintosh was utility, stability, and so on. In modern day parlance, it's function, construction, and aesthetics. What effect does the function have on construction? What effect does it have on aesthetics? I think I've got it right, I'm not sure.
So once you consider all these interactions, all the different things, then you've got the bones of a solution. Of course, you've got these people called clients who are actually the patrons, and they're the people who set the agenda. They will set the time scale, they'll set cost plan, and so on. So sometimes all these have got to be weighted in some way. And of course, if you're the architect, you weight it as well in terms of design. So that.
So you've used that throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have a seat again? Do you think that's still used in architecture now, in the same way that you
I
took
don't know.
it
I can't
on?
speak for.
You can't speak. Yeah.
But I don't think. Oh dear. Yeah.
I'm setting you up there, aren't I?
Yes. Well, it's from my point of view here, having been retired now for about 10 years, it's a different profession. I would not survive today.
Yeah.
First of all, when I started up, it said there was no competition for architects. It was a fixed fee, and that was prescribed precisely what you had to do for that, and you didn't do any less than that. Therefore, you were totally responsible. Nowadays, people seem to think, patrons seem to think, for economic reasons, that certain things should happen, and the only seems to me that the emphasis today is on how much does a building cost at tender stage, not how much is it going to cost after it's built, or for the rest of its working life, and all that sort of thing had to be taken into account when we were working.
It's interesting you mentioned the life of a building, because this building has quite some life in it. It is, we know that the students, it's one of their favourite places to come and study. There is demand for space for students in this building. They love coming here.
Well, it's the same as they say
Yeah.
about dogs and Christmas. Building is for life, and you have to visualise it all the way down the road. We had our office in Murray Place, and every quadrant of that is, all the 4 quadrants are exactly the same geometrically. But if you look at them all, they're all totally different, because the wind and the weather has made its imprint a different way on that side and that one and that one. And that's lived with me for a long time as well.
Yeah. So the environment you were creating in this building for students, in terms of, was that part of any of the discussions that were had?
Yes. On the other hand, we were building a building at that time for books. There was going to be an undergraduate reading room out the back where the car park is.
Yeah.
And this was for access for books. And we actually designed a honeycomb hexagonal plan thing, which organically went out over the car park and into the meadows, over the road and so on. But it never happened, I'm afraid.
Yeah. One of the things I think a lot of the staff who work here enjoy is the view you get out of this building. So quite a few of us are based in an office at the back there, and on a glorious day, not quite like the weather we've had this week, you get these panoramas over the meadows, over the Pentlands, and very often we have visitors that are very jealous of this view, and that was definitely part of the thinking and the design, because of the location.
Oh yeah, the location generated that. But I have to say, the first room to it settled was the librarian's room in the southwest corner. He says that's where he's going to have his office.
Had to have the best view.
Yeah. Just don't forget the basics. Again, it's commodity, firmness, and delight, and it's the working together of all these things, and don't be afraid to make an analysis of a solution and then change something just because you like it.
Basil Spence's involvement, if there was any, beyond that initial sort of meeting that you had?
He was always very supportive. By the time I got into Edinburgh, he'd won the Coventry competition and he was down in London. But he used to come up about every once a month or something like that. And I knew he was coming because you could smell the cigar smoke and the smoked salmon coming for his lunch. And he would come round the drawing boards, and just half an hour with him it fired you up, and it kept you going until the next time he came back. He also used to send little handwritten notes of you know, any comments he had. So he kept the film good.
When you come back to the library now, is there anything that strikes you as you think it still works particularly well and that you're proud of, or is there anything that you think, oh, I would have done that differently for the library now?
No, I'm quite pleased that it's become a working tool, and it's been robust enough, it would seem, to accommodate all the different changes, with the initial concept shining through here and there. Yeah. Well, yes, there are one or two things I would have done differently, but that's life. Yeah.
I think you
have
meant
to be aware of that as an architect. You not only got weather to impinge on your buildings, but you got human beings sellotaping notices on these beautiful columns. Which
haven't you said before that it came in on time and budget, but also with additional things that came into play?
Well, the only additional thing was the air conditioning. It was a very basic form of air conditioning in the initial brief, but at £5 a square foot and 24 months, it's not bad. I mean, I suppose that's equivalent of what, £500 a square metre here, and that's still cheap. They're coming in at £1,000 a square metre nowadays. Yeah.
You didn't
With all high quality materials as well.
You didn't do too badly then.
Yeah, it's done all right. I'm quite pleased with it.
Good.
That'll last another 50 years.
Can I just ask a little bit more about your what you perhaps took away from working with Spence? I mean, what did you learn specifically from Spence, and maybe more generally, how would you characterise the Spence practice at this sort of time? And are there certain things that you think make something a product of the Spence office?
Oh dear. He was very much the centre of attention. Loved every minute of it. But he was also very good at delegating. But once having delegated, he still kept his eye on it, and he would keep on encouraging. And I suppose in his comments when he was round the drawing board, he would steer you delicately around something, and he would engage in a conversation and a dialogue, and that helped crystallise things in your mind. He was also a great draftsman, a great man with pastels. And one of my first jobs was there as a student was to set up perspectives for him, and he would put them on his light box and do a perspective in about half an hour, and the thing had taken me about 3 weeks to do, and then he would crumple up my drawing and throw it away again. No, he was always very encouraging and very much involved, but not overtly. You know, he was very good at doing it subtly.
But even giving, so obviously you get your own degree of ability to shape your project. Do you think there are certain running themes or features that go through all the products of the office and all the designs?
I hope not. No, I think we always try to go back to basic principles. Forget what you've done before. Learn from it, certainly, but with all that learning, start again at utility.
Let's go to over Arab's office. I mean, they were working with you.
Oh, yes.
Were they a powerful input
Oh yes.
post Sydney?
Oh yes.
And who was working from Arab's? Was it the Scottish branch or the one?
It was Scottish.
Yeah.
Fraser Anderson, Jim Shipway,
Yeah.
and O'Varrett himself.
He was involved, was he?
Oh, he came across a few times. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He was doing the kind of Basil with Arabs.
With Arabs, yes. So
Yeah.
coming up
Yeah.
out of the boat
Yeah.
and having a
Yeah.
sail there.
Yeah. Oh no, as I say, O'Varrett worked well also with the contractor.
Mhm.
You know, talked about the foundations and things. Even things like the basic structure was designed so that the concrete work would be in situ from Monday to Friday, and then the precast units would come in at the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And it was that kind of
Yeah.
rhythm which helped the contractor immensely. And it was no problem for Arabs.
Of course, he started with Kears, didn't he? With concrete. That was his thing personally
Yes,
in the
yeah.
30s.
Yeah.
And I was Dick Fivefoot's deputy librarian for the last 2 years
Yes.
in this
remember.
building, and to him, he was very possessive about the building. This was his building.
Oh,
he
yes?
felt. Any kind of change was a sort of insult to the
Well,
building.
it was his building because he had as much to do as I had.
One of the first things I did in my office was to stick posters on the pillars. Oh my God! I brought the ceiling down. I believe they were all cast on site. Some of them several times to get the finish right.
Oh, they were very fine steel shutters, and everyone's a work of art again. You know, because when the shutters were struck, they were covered in polythene, and you can still see the drapery marks sometimes. And, so everyone's an individual.
The university's obviously been doing quite a lot of refurbishment of buildings around George Square for the last decade or so. There's a few people in the room here that lived through the refurbishment of this building. One of the things that struck me at that time was that unlike many of the other buildings in George Square, this building wasn't tired in the sense that its fixtures and fittings seemed tired. And that's something I tended to see in the other buildings. It was more the function of the library had changed so drastically that it needed to be recast for the 21st century. Why do you think this had this durability about it that, say, that the Appleton Tower or the lower rise blocks in George Square didn't have?
It must have been the choice of materials, as I've gone through before. I mean, natural timbers, quartz floors, beech,
Yeah.
mosaics. It can only have been that. And they were lasting, they were built to last for the lifespan of the building. I mean, I remember at that time, I remember reading something, some QS had done a survey about life cycle costing. And so you take a normal warehouse, a regularly thin shed, which is built to last for 40 years. The tender cost of the total cost is 10%. 10%. And the 90% still to come. And that was just with a regularly tin shed. I don't know if these figures are right, but it gives you an indication of what. And you must always have your view on that, because the bulk of the time, that's when the money is going to be spent. Staff costs, heating costs, maintenance, repairs, all that kind of stuff.
You mentioned that there was a prospect of a reading room octagonally, I think, going out the back at one point. What was it that kind of put the kibosh on that? Was it finance or planning, and did that influence what happened in the second floor of the library, where you had this huge space of a reading room? That's what influenced that?
I don't know why. It must have been lack of money. Couldn't have been anything else.
Right. That's interesting, because it's one of the options that was looked at a few years back anyway, extending the library again.
All I do remember is designing this hexagonal honeycomb thing, as I say, which grew out right over into the meadows. My partner at that time, John Legg, seized on it when it was, and you've now got a Scottish Widows headquarters building.
Yeah, I was wondering if you ever regretted the decision you took aged 4.
No. Sometimes I did halfway through my career, but now that I'm retired, I think it was the best decision, because I've now got my painting and I can concentrate entirely on that, and I'm not doing it to pay the mortgage, which means I can experiment and make mistakes and doesn't worry anybody.
Have you ever painted the library?
No. Oh, I've drawn the library. Yeah.
Jack.
Andrew and Rachel might both be interested to know we not only have the original chairs and some of the other fixtures and fittings, we kept the librarian sherry glasses as well.
Oh,
So the librarian no longer drinks sherry in the librarian's room, but we could if we got out the glasses.
very good.
And I think on that note, that was an excellent way to segue into, we'd like to invite you all to join us for a glass of wine and we continue the conversations out in the foyer. Can we thank Andrew for his time and his generosity with his memories in the usual way?